The Galactic Council chamber looked like someone had designed it during an acid trip. Holographic displays floated everywhere. The ceiling was somehow also the floor depending on which species you asked, and the whole place smelled faintly of burnt cinnamon. Jake Peterson sat in the human delegation pod, which was basically a fancy chair with too many buttons, wondering if he should have read the employee handbook before accepting this job. Order! Order! The council speaker, a floating jellyfish thing named Quilmara, pulsed an alarming shade of purple. We face a crisis of unprecedented magnitude. Jake perked up. Finally, something interesting. He'd been here 3 weeks, and so far the biggest debate had been about standardizing bathroom signage across species. Spoiler alert. It got heated. The Kravix have struck again, Quilmara announced, and the entire chamber erupted into chaos. Delegates were screaming. Some were literally screaming the Throaxians had 4 mouths and used all of them. Others were doing whatever their species did to express absolute terror. The representative from Plendar 5 fainted, which was impressive since they didn't have a circulatory system. Jake raised his hand. Sorry, new guy question. What's a Kravix? Every single delegate turned to stare at him. Quilmara's tendrils drooped in what Jake had learned meant deep concern, or possibly indigestion. You don't know about the Kravix? This came from Ambassador Rolthar, a lizard-adjacent guy who always looked vaguely constipated. They're apex predators, 8 feet tall, claws like plasma cutters, teeth that can bite through starship hull plating. Okay, so space monsters. Got it. Not monsters, Quilmara corrected, somehow looking stern despite being a jellyfish. Sentient space monsters. They communicate, they pilot ships, they negotiate. And then they eat the negotiators, shrieked someone from the back. Jake blinked. Come again? Rolthar pulled up a holographic display showing what looked like a dinosaur had a baby with a nightmare. 12 diplomatic missions, 12 species, all consumed. The Kravix don't just kill, human Jake. They devour sapient beings. Metal, Jake muttered. This is not metal. Quilmara's purple intensified. This is a galactic emergency. The Kravix have established a territory in Sector 7, and they've made it clear. Any ship that enters gets boarded, and any crew gets eaten. The Throaxian delegate was now crying from 3 of his 4 mouths. The 4th was eating what looked like stress candy. So what's the plan? Jake asked. Military response? Blockade? Strongly worded letter? We avoid Sector 7, Quilmara said flatly. We've marked it as forbidden space. We warn all vessels. We wait for them to die out or leave. Jake stared. That's it? That's the plan? We just give them a chunk of space? Human Jake. Rolthar leaned forward, his vertical pupils dilating. I watched the security footage from the last contact attempt. The Kravix ripped through a 6-member team like they were made of tissue paper. Then she ate them, on camera, while maintaining eye contact with the recording device. She? We believe it was a female. Hard to tell when you're being digested. The chamber fell into an uncomfortable silence. Jake looked around at the assembled representatives of galactic civilization species that had mastered faster-than-light travel, quantum computing, and interdimensional mathematics, and they were all absolutely terrified of one species that liked to eat people. Right, Jake said slowly. So, just to be crystal clear here, Sector 7 is completely off-limits. Under no circumstances should anyone, especially a dumb human who's only been here 3 weeks, go anywhere near there. Exactly, Quilmara practically shouted. Human Jake understands! Sector 7 is a death trap! Stay away! A death trap, Jake repeated, making a big show of marking it on his datapad. Sector 7, got it. Super dangerous. Definitely not going there. Quilmara sagged with relief. Oh good. We were worried humans might do something reckless. Jake gave his most reassuring smile. The same smile he'd given his mom before every stupid decision he'd ever made. Nah, he said. We're not that dumb. Narrator's note. They were absolutely that dumb. Jake's shuttle was 3 hours into the flight to Sector 7 when he started questioning his life choices. Not enough to turn around, obviously, but enough to acknowledge that maybe, just maybe, this was stupid even by human standards. Okay, but here's the thing, he said out loud to nobody. Because talking to yourself in space was either the first sign of madness or excellent company depending on your perspective. They said she eats people. But did anyone ask why? The shuttle's navigation system beeped unhelpfully. Exactly. No investigation. No attempt at communication beyond, please don't eat me, which, let's be honest, is not a strong opening diplomatic. Strategy. He unwrapped a protein bar and gestured at the view screen with it. I mean, humans used to think sharks were mindless killing machines, and now we know they're just big fish puppies with a PR problem. The comparison between a shark and an 8-foot-tall sentient apex predator that had definitely eaten 12 diplomatic teams was probably flawed, but Jake was committed now. He'd filed his flight plan as personal exploration, packed a bag with snacks and a stress ball shaped like Earth, and specifically did not tell anyone where he was going because that would involve admitting where he was going. The Sector 7 boundary appeared on his screen. Beyond it, sensor data got weird, lots of debris, a few derelict stations, and one life sign on the abandoned mining outpost designated Station Kepler 7. One very large life sign. There you are, Jake muttered, adjusting course. His hands were definitely not sweating. That was just condensation. From space. Space condensation. The station loomed ahead, a spinning wheel of rust and broken dreams. Half the lights were out, and the docking bay doors hung open like a mouth, which was not an ominous comparison at all. This is fine, Jake said, bringing the shuttle in. This is totally fine. Just a routine visit to a condemned station in forbidden space to meet a creature that eats sapient beings. People do this all the time. Probably. The docking clamps engaged with a metallic shriek that definitely didn't make him jump. Jake grabbed his backpack contents, 2 sandwiches, a first aid kit that was wildly inadequate for anything that could bite through starship hulls, his stress ball, and a misplaced sense of confidence. He paused at the airlock, took a breath, and cycled it open. The station's interior was dark. Emergency lighting cast everything in a red glow that screamed horror movie in every language. The air was stale and cold, and something was dripping in the distance with rhythmic precision designed to maximize creepiness. "Hello?" Jake called out. His voice echoed down the corridor. "Anybody home? Any terrifying apex predators want to have a chat?" Silence. Then, from somewhere deeper in the station, a low growl that Jake felt in his bones. "Okay, so you are home. Great, cool. Love that for us." He started walking, because turning back now would mean admitting this was a terrible idea, and Jake's pride was stronger than his survival instinct. "I come in peace. Also, I brought sandwiches, turkey and cheese. I don't know what you eat besides, people, but I figured I'd offer." Another growl, closer this time. The corridor opened into what used to be the station's main hub. Cargo containers lay scattered like a giant's toys. Claw marks gouged the walls, and in the center, illuminated by a shaft of emergency lighting like the universe's worst spotlight, was her, the Kravix. She was even bigger than the holos suggested. 8 feet of scaled muscle and terrible purpose. Her hide was midnight blue with bioluminescent patterns that pulsed slowly, either breathing or preparing to attack. Jake couldn't tell. 4 eyes, arranged in a way that suggested she could see in roughly all directions at once, fixed on him. Her mouth was closed, but Jake could see the edge of teeth that belonged in a paleontology museum. She was magnificent. She was absolutely terrifying. She was definitely deciding which part of him to eat first. "Hi," Jake said, with the kind of forced cheer usually reserved for meeting your girlfriend's parents. "I'm Jake. You must be the Kravix everyone's afraid of." The Kravix tilted her head. Her claws, and holy hell, those were some serious claws, scraped against the metal floor. "Right. So, funny story," Jake continued, because apparently his mouth had decided to keep working despite his brain screaming at it to shut up. "I know we got off to a rough start as a galactic community, the whole eating thing, but I was wondering if maybe we could talk about it, like species to species, before the eating, ideally without the eating." The Kravix took a step forward. Jake's heart tried to evacuate through his throat, and then he noticed it. She was limping. Her left rear leg barely touched the ground, and there was a dark stain on her flank that definitely looked like dried blood. She wasn't hunting. She was cornered. "Oh," Jake said softly. "You're hurt." The Kravix froze. All 4 eyes locked onto Jake with an intensity that made him acutely aware of every stupid decision that had led to this moment. Her lips pulled back slightly, revealing teeth that could absolutely make good on the whole bite-through starship hulls thing. Jake's brain was screaming a very clear message. Run. His body, in an act of profound betrayal, stayed exactly where it was. "Okay, so here's the situation," Jake said, keeping his voice level despite the fact that his internal organs were trying to escape in different directions. "You're clearly injured. You're trapped on this station, and based on the way you're looking at me, you're trying to decide if I'm a threat or a meal." The Kravix's growl went up in pitch. Not quite a snarl, but definitely in the neighborhood. Third option, Jake continued, slowly lowering his backpack to the ground. I'm an idiot who brought sandwiches. He pulled out the wrapped sandwich and held it up like an offering to the universe's most dangerous god. The Kravix's eyes tracked the movement. Her nostrils flared. Jake hadn't even noticed she had nostrils until now, and she took a sharp breath. Turkey, Jake said. Not sure if you're into poultry, but it's all I've got besides myself, and I'd really prefer to keep me off the menu. For a long moment, nothing happened. The station's life support hummed. Something sparked in the distance. Jake's heart attempted to break the galactic record for fastest beats per minute. Then the Kravix moved. She was fast. Terrifyingly fast. 1 second she was 20 feet away. The next she was close enough that Jake could see his reflection in her eyes, all 4 of them. She loomed over him, easily twice his height, close enough that he could feel the heat radiating off her scales, close enough that one swipe of those claws would end this diplomatic mission permanently. Jake held perfectly still, the sandwich extended in his trembling hand like the world's worst peace offering. The Kravix's head lowered, her mouth opened slightly, and Jake got a very detailed view of a dental situation that would give a shark an inferiority complex. Her breath was hot against his face and smelled like, actually, not as bad as he'd expected. Kind of metallic. She sniffed the sandwich. Then, with surprising delicacy, she took it from his hand. Jake's hand was still attached to his body. This was already going better than expected. The Kravix retreated a few steps, never taking her eyes off him, and ate the sandwich in 2 bites, wrapper and all. Okay, so, note to self. Next time, unwrap it first, Jake muttered. He slowly reached into his bag again. I've got one more. And also don't freak out a first aid kit. That wound on your leg looks bad. The Kravix tilted her head again. It was almost dog-like. If dogs were 8-foot-tall murder machines with glowing eyes. Jake unwrapped the second sandwich, learning from his mistakes, and offered it. This time, the Kravix approached more cautiously, her injured leg held gingerly. She took the food and retreated to a cargo container, where she settled down with a huff that was decidedly less threatening than before. Right. So, the medical thing. Jake pulled out the first aid kit, which suddenly looked even more pathetically inadequate. I'm going to be honest with you. I have no idea if human medical supplies work on Kravix biology, but that wound looks infected, and infection is bad for pretty much everyone with a circulatory system. Do you have a circulatory system? The Kravix watched him with those unnerving 4-eyed stare. I'm going to take your silence as yes, please help me, strange human who brought food. Jake took a tentative step forward. The Kravix tensed but didn't move. Another step. Still no attack. Okay, good. We're building trust. This is nice. Very diplomatic. He knelt beside her injured leg, and she shifted, angling it toward him. The wound was deep, a gash that cut through scales and into the muscle beneath. It looked like shrapnel damage. Ship crash? Jake asked, pulling out antiseptic. The debris field outside suggests something went wrong. The Kravix made a sound. Not quite a growl, not quite a whine. Something in between that Jake's translator implant tried and failed to process. Yeah, I figured. This is going to sting. He applied the antiseptic. The Kravix's whole body went rigid, her claws scraping against the metal floor with a screech that made Jake's teeth ache. But she didn't pull away, didn't attack, just endured. Jake worked quickly, cleaning the wound and applying a synthetic skin bandage that probably wasn't meant for alien physiology but was better than nothing. The whole time, the Kravix watched him with an expression he couldn't quite read. When he finished, he sat back on his heels. There, not great, but it should help until we can get you proper medical attention. The Kravix was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, deliberately, she reached out one massive clawed hand and placed it on Jake's shoulder. Jake stopped breathing. The claws were cold against his shirt. One twitch and she could gut him. One squeeze and his shoulder would be powder. Instead, she just rested it there, gentle, almost careful. You're welcome, Jake whispered. And the Kravix, the terrifying apex predator that had eaten 12 diplomatic missions, made a sound that was unmistakably a purr. Jake's brain was experiencing what could only be described as a complete system failure. The creature that had sent the entire Galactic Council into collective panic was purring. Purring. Like a cat. A giant, terrifying, person-eating cat. But still. Okay, Jake said slowly. So you're not actually trying to kill me. That's good. That's a positive development in our relationship. The Kravix removed her hand from his shoulder and shifted her weight, wincing as she moved her injured leg. Up close, Jake could see she was in worse shape than he'd thought. Her scales were dull in places, her bioluminescent patterns flickering irregularly. She was exhausted. "How long have you been stuck here?" Jake asked, settling down onto the floor a few feet away. If she was going to eat him, she'd had plenty of chances. Might as well get comfortable. The Kravix regarded him for a moment, then held up one clawed hand. She extended 3 fingers, then made a gesture Jake didn't understand, then extended 3 more fingers. 3. Something? 3 weeks, Jake guessed. She made a sound that his translator rendered as static, but her posture suggested he was close. 3 weeks on a dead station with a bad leg and no food. Jake pulled out his stress ball and squeezed it. "Yeah, okay. I'd probably eat some diplomats too at that point. No judgment." The Kravix made another sound, this one sharper, almost indignant. "Wait, hold on." Jake leaned forward. "Are you saying you didn't eat them?" She tilted her head and made a complex series of clicks and growls that his translator implant interpreted as translation error, contextual ambiguity. But the way she was moving her hands, gesturing emphatically, reminded Jake of every frustrated person trying to explain something important. "Okay, communication barrier. Let me think." Jake looked around the cargo bay and spotted a damaged datapad half buried under debris. He crawled over, prompting a curious head tilt from the Kravix, and retrieved it. Miraculously, it still had power. He pulled up a basic drawing program and sketched a stick, figure, human, me. Then he drew a significantly less stick figure-ish creature with 4 eyes. "You. Kravix." The Kravix leaned in, her massive head hovering over his shoulder. She smelled like ozone and something spicy. Jake drew more stick figures. "Other species. Diplomats." He drew X's over them. "Dead. Everyone says you killed them." The Kravix's growl went from curious to distinctly annoyed. She reached over, and Jake's heart did a little flip as those claws came toward him and tapped the datapad. Hard. Then she grabbed his hand, surprisingly gently considering she could crush it like a potato chip, and guided it to draw something else. Ships. She wanted him to draw ships. Jake sketched them out. The Kravix took the stylus, holding it in her claws like a toothpick, and drew the ships firing on a planet. Her movements were jerky but deliberate. "They attacked your world?" Jake asked quietly. The Kravix's bioluminescent patterns flared bright red. She drew more. Stick. Figures of her species. Buildings. Then explosions. Then she drew the diplomatic ships again and crossed them out with violent slashes. "They weren't diplomats," Jake breathed. "They were attackers." The Kravix set down the stylus and made a sound that needed no translation. Affirmation. "Oh hell." Jake ran a hand through his hair. "The council sent people to your territory. You defended yourselves. And then they called you monsters." The Kravix slumped against the cargo container, suddenly looking less like a terrifying predator and more like someone who was just incredibly tired. Her patterns dimmed to a soft blue. Jake felt a surge of anger on her behalf. "That's such garbage. They didn't even try to understand. They just..." He stopped, noticing how she was holding herself. Tense. Defensive. Alone. Without thinking, Jake reached out and placed his hand on her arm. Her scales were warm and surprisingly smooth. The Kravix went very still. "Hey," Jake said softly. "For what it's worth, I believe you." She turned all 4 eyes on him, and Jake saw something there he recognized. Relief. The kind that comes when someone finally listens. They sat like that for a moment, human and Kravix, in the red emergency lighting of an abandoned station. Then the Kravix did something that would have sent the Galactic Council into cardiac arrest. She flopped onto her side with a heavy thud that shook the deck plating, exposing her belly. Jake blinked. Are you showing submission? Or is this a trap? Because I've watched enough nature documentaries to know that belly up can go either way." The Kravix huffed a sound that was definitely impatient and gestured at her stomach with one hand while keeping her eyes on him. "You want me to?" Jake trailed off, understanding dawning. "No. No way. This is insane." The Kravix huffed again, more insistently. "If I die doing this, I'm going to be so mad," Jake muttered. But he moved closer and, with the kind of trepidation usually reserved for disarming bombs, placed his hand on her belly. The scales there were softer, warmer. He could feel muscle underneath, and something that might have been a heartbeat. Or several heartbeats. Kravix biology was unclear. He scratched gently, the way he used to scratch his dog's belly back on Earth. The Kravix's eyes half closed. Her back legs started twitching, and the purr that rumbled through her was so loud it vibrated in Jake's chest. "You're basically a giant space dog," Jake said, wonder in his voice. "An 8-foot-tall, 4-eyed, scale-covered space dog who everyone thinks is a monster." The Kravix's tail, which Jake hadn't really noticed until now, thumped against the floor with a rhythmic bang that echoed through the bay. Jake started laughing. He couldn't help it. Here he was, giving belly rubs to the most feared predator in the galaxy, and she was enjoying it like a golden retriever. "Okay," he said, still scratching. "Okay, we're going back. To the council. Together. And we're going to fix this mess." The Kravix opened one eye and looked at him questioningly. "Yeah, I know. They're terrified of you. But here's the thing about humans." Jake grinned. "We're really, really good at befriending things that are supposed to eat us. It's kind of our thing." It took another hour of belly rubs, which Jake was now calling diplomatic negotiations in his head, before the Kravix finally rolled back onto her feet. She moved with less of a limp now. Whether from the medical treatment or just feeling less threatened, Jake couldn't tell. "So," Jake said, brushing dust off his pants, "we need to figure out actual communication. The drawing thing works. But if we're going to convince the council you're not a mindless killing machine, we need details." The Kravix made a thoughtful rumbling sound and lumbered over to a partially collapsed workstation. She started digging through debris with surprising care for someone with claws that size. After a moment, she pulled out a small, intact data core and held it up triumphantly. "You've been holding out on me," Jake said, taking it. "What's on here?" She gestured at it, then at herself, then made a sweeping motion that Jake interpreted as everything, or possibly my entire civilization, or maybe lunch menu. Communication was still imperfect. Jake plugged the core into his datapad. It took a moment to process. Kravix data architecture was apparently way more advanced than standard galactic tech, but when it loaded, his jaw dropped. Images, thousands of them. Kravix cities with soaring architecture that looked like someone had taught crystals to grow into buildings. Kravix families, yes, families, with smaller Kravix that were actually kind of cute in a baby dinosaur way. Kravix art, music files, literature. "You're not just defending territory," Jake whispered. "You have a whole civilization, culture, your people." The Kravix made a sound that the braid Jusning translator finally managed to process. Affirmative, pride, frustration. Jake scrolled further and found video files. His stomach dropped as he watched them. Council ships entering Kravix space. The Kravix sending clear warning signals. His translator picked them up easily, which meant the council ships definitely had too. The ships ignoring those warnings and proceeding to a Kravix colony world. Then the weapons fire started. "They fired first," Jake said, his voice tight. "Every single time." The Kravix were defending their homes. The video showed Kravix ships responding. Yes. Fighting back, yes. Boarding the attacking vessels and eliminating the crews. But it wasn't mindless slaughter. It was war. War that the council had started and then blamed on the defenders. The Eton diplomats. Jake said slowly. "They weren't diplomats at all, were they? They were soldiers." The Kravix nodded, all four eyes blazing with vindication. And the council knew, or at least suspected. But it's easier to label you monsters than admit they screwed up. Jake felt a wave of disgust. "That's the most bureaucratic thing I've ever heard, and I work for a bureaucracy." He kept scrolling and found something else. Recent files. Images of this station. The Kravix, he really needed a name for her, had been on a solo reconnaissance mission. Her ship had been damaged by debris from an old battle. She'd crashed here, injured and stranded. And when council patrols detected her life sign, instead of offering aid, they declared the entire sector forbidden. They'd left her here to die. "That's it," Jake said, standing up so fast the Kravix startled. "Nope, no. We're fixing this right now. This is the most messed up thing I've seen since I joined Galactic Society, and I once watched the Throaxian delegate eat his own proposal." The Kravix tilted her head questioningly. "We're going back to the council," Jake said firmly. "You, me, this data core, and enough righteous anger to power a small sun. But first," he paused, "do you have a name? Because I can't keep thinking of you as the Kravix. That's like calling me the human." She made a complex sound that his translator rendered as Gnashahrak, ETH. "That's beautiful, and I'm absolutely going to butcher it. How about Nasha? Is that close enough?" The Kravix Nasha considered this, then made a sound that was close enough to agreement. "Nasha it is." Jake held out his hand. Partners? Ganasha looked at his hand, then carefully, gently, wrapped her massive clawed fingers around it. Her grip was warm and firm. Okay, so full disclosure, Jake said as they headed toward his shuttle. The Council is probably going to lose their minds when they see you. There might be panic, possibly weapons fire. Definitely a lot of screaming. Ganasha's patterns flickered in a way that Jake was starting to recognize as amusement. But here's the thing about humans that the Council hasn't quite figured out yet. Jake grinned as they reached the airlock. We look at apex predators and think friend. We looked at wolves and made dogs. We looked at wild cats and made house cats. We literally domesticated our own predators for fun. Ganasha made a questioning rumble. I'm saying that the galaxy thinks humans are the diplomatic species, the peaceful ones, the ones who talk things out. Jake's grin widened. But really, we're the species that makes friends with everything that could kill us. We're pack-bonding idiots who adopt danger. And right now, that's exactly what makes us perfect for this job. They boarded the shuttle. Nasha had to squeeze into the cargo area. The ship wasn't designed for 8-foot passengers, but she managed. As Jake fired up the engines, she settled down with her head near the cockpit, watching him work with all 4 curious eyes. Also, Jake added, pulling up his communication array, I should probably warn you. I'm about to make you the galaxy's first emotional support apex predator. The Council is going to hate it. It's going to be amazing. Ganasha's purr filled the shuttle cabin. Jake opened a channel to the Council and sent a simple message. Returning from Sector 7. Bringing a guest. Don't shoot. Then he engaged the thrusters and pointed the ship toward Council space. Let's go make some friends, very uncomfortable, he said. Ganasha's tail thumped against the cargo bay floor in agreement. The Council chamber had seen many dramatic moments in its 1,000-year history. Declarations of war. Historic peace treaties. That one time the Plender 5 delegate accidentally set off the fire suppression system during a heated debate about trade routes. But nothing had prepared them for Jake Peterson walking in with an 8-foot Kravix at his side. The screaming started immediately. Security! Quilmara shrieked, her jellyfish body flashing through every color in the panic spectrum. It's eating him! Someone yelled. I'm not being eaten, Jake shouted back. I'm fine. Everyone calm down. Approximately 0 people calmed down. Ambassador Rolthar had climbed onto his chair. 3 delegates had fainted. The Throaxian was screaming from all 4 mouths in 4-part harmony. Security drones were swarming in, weapons charging with an ominous whine. Nasha, to her credit, just sat down and waited, her tail curled around her feet. Her bioluminescent patterns pulsed a calm blue. Stand down, Jake bellowed, positioning himself between Nasha and the approaching security. She's not a threat. She's injured. And before you do something spectacularly stupid, you should know she's also got diplomatic immunity because I just granted it to her. You can't do that, Quilmara sputtered. I literally just did. Check the Human Delegation Authority Charter. Section 47, Paragraph 12. Humans can extend emergency diplomatic protection to any sapient being in immediate danger. Jake pulled out his datapad. And since you all left her to DIE on a derelict station in Sector 7, I'd say she qualifies. That got the room's attention. The screaming died down to terrified whimpering. She crashed, Jake continued, his voice hard. Injured. Alone. And instead of offering aid to a stranded sapient being, you declared the whole sector off-limits and abandoned her. She's a monster, Rolthar protested from his chair. She's a soldier who was defending her home, Jake slapped the datapad. And I've got proof. Nasha, say hi. Nasha raised one clawed hand and waved. It was simultaneously adorable and absolutely terrifying. 2 more delegates fainted. Jake pulled up the data core files and projected them onto the main display. This is Kravix Prime, their homeworld. Notice the cities, the art, the families? Notice how they're not mindless killing machines but an advanced civilization? The chamber fell silent as images played across the screen. Now watch this, Jake said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. This is Council ships entering Kravix space. Ignoring hails, ignoring warnings, and oh look, firing first on a civilian colony. The weapons fire lit up the display. The Council delegates shifted uncomfortably. Every single encounter. Jake advanced through the files. The Council sent ships into their territory. The Kravix defended themselves. And then you called them monsters and blamed them for fighting back. That's not, Quilmara started. It's literally on video. Jake's anger finally boiled over. You started a war. Lost, and then decided it was easier to label them as dangerous predators than admit you screwed up. You made them the villains so you wouldn't have to be the bad guys. The silence was deafening. Gnasha made a low, rumbling sound. Jake glanced back at her, and she gestured toward the display. Oh, right. Jake pulled up one more file. This is Gnasha's ship, damaged by debris from one of your battles. She crashed on Station Kepler 7 and was stranded there for 3 weeks. Injured, starving, and when your patrols detected her, you sealed off the sector and left her there. We thought, Rolthar began weakly. You thought it was easier to let her die than actually try communication. Because that's what you do, apparently. Shoot first, ask questions never, and blame the survivors. Jake crossed his arms. Well, guess what? I showed up with sandwiches and basic decency. And look, I didn't get eaten. Because she's not a monster. She's sapient, she's scared, and she's been fighting a defensive war against your aggression. Quilmara's tendrils drooped. If this is true, it's true. It's all documented. And now you're going to apologize, open peace negotiations with the Kravix people, and maybe, just maybe, learn to try talking before shooting. Jake walked over and scratched Gnasha behind her head ridge. She leaned into it, purring. Also, Gnasha here is now officially my emotional support, Kravix. Your what? Half the chamber asked in unison. My emotional support, Kravix. For stress. She's very calming. Jake kept scratching. Gnasha's back leg started thumping. See? Perfectly friendly. That thing could rip you apart, Rolthar squeaked. So could you if you really wanted to, Jake pointed out. But you don't, because you're civilized. Same with Gnasha. The difference is I bothered to treat her like a person instead of a monster. Gnasha made a pleased rumbling sound and rolled slightly to the side, exposing her belly. Oh no, Quilmara whispered. Not here too. Yep, belly rubs. Jake obliged, and Gnasha's purr rattled the chamber. Turns out the most fearsome predator in the galaxy just needed someone to actually listen to her. Wild concept, I know. Ambassador Rolthar slowly climbed down from his chair, staring at the display of Kravix civilization, then at Gnasha, receiving belly rubs, then at Jake. Humans, he said slowly, are absolutely insane. We prefer creatively diplomatic, Jake corrected. We're the species that looked at wolves and thought good dog. We befriended horses. We made pets out of cats that literally think they're superior to us. We keep snakes and spiders as companions. One guy on Earth has a crocodile named Crocky that he takes for walks. That's horrifying, someone muttered. That's humanity, Jake said cheerfully. We pack bond with anything. It's our superpower. While you're all trying to calculate threat levels and defensive positions, we're trying to figure out if something likes head scritches. And you know what? It works. Gnasha's tail thumped agreement against the council floor, leaving small dents. So here's what's going to happen, Jake said, standing up. The council is going to issue a formal apology to the Kravix people. You're going to open actual diplomatic channels with talking, not shooting. You're going to help Gnasha get home. And you're going to admit that maybe, just maybe, humans understand something about interspecies relations that the rest of you missed. Which is? Quilmara asked weakly. Jake smiled. Sometimes the scariest-looking beings just need a friend. And humans? We're really good at being friends. Especially when everyone else is too scared to try. Gnasha stood up, walked over to Jake, and rested her massive head on top of his. It was possibly the most dangerous display of affection in galactic history. See? Jake said, his voice slightly muffled. Perfectly safe. Now, if you'll excuse us, Gnasha needs proper medical attention, a meal that isn't emergency rations, and probably about 3 weeks of belly rubs to make up for what she's been through. As they walked out, Jake and his emotional support, apex predator, the council sat in stunned silence. Finally, Rolthar spoke. Are humans the peaceful species or the terrifying one? Quilmara's tendrils trembled. After watching that, I honestly can't tell anymore. Both, someone said quietly. They're definitely both. Outside the chamber, Jake grinned at Gnasha. That went well. Gnasha made a sound that his translator interpreted as laughter. Come on, Jake said. Let's get you home. And then maybe we can work on translators that actually work with Kravix language. I feel like that would have prevented this whole mess. As they walked through the station, corridors causing a wave of panic and hasty retreats wherever they went, Jake couldn't help but feel proud. Humans had a reputation now, not as warriors or diplomats or traitors, as the species that makes friends with monsters. And honestly, Jake thought, scratching Gnasha's head as they walked, He was perfectly fine with that.